Listening, fill in the blanks.
Let's start.
Other possible routes have been offered, though, for Igor Novikov, astrophysicist behind the 1980s theorem known as the self-consistency principle. Time travel is possible within certain boundaries. Novikov argued that any event causing a paradox would have zero probability. It would be possible, however, to affect, rather than change, historical outcomes if travelers avoided all inconsistencies. Averting the sinking of the Titanic, for example, would revoke any future imperative to stop it from sinking. It would be impossible. Saving selected passengers from the water and replacing them with realistic corpses would not be impossible, however, as the historical record would not be altered in any way.
So, will humans one day step across the same boundary that the neutrinos have? World-renowned astrophysicist Stephen Hawking believes that once spaceships can exceed the speed of light, humans could feasibly travel millions of years into the future in order to repopulate Earth in the event of a forthcoming apocalypse. This is because, as the spaceships accelerate into the future, time would slow down around them. Hawking concedes that bygone eras are off-limits. This would violate the fundamental rule that cause comes before effect.
As a teacher, she'd noticed that some students had a relatively low command of English but could still communicate very effectively. She recalls one specific student named Faisal, who was a factory supervisor. Despite not knowing much English, she says, this guy could just sit and listen to anybody very calmly, clearly, and then he could respond, and absolutely express his thoughts beautifully. She'd also observed some students in the opposite situation, people who knew quite a bit of English but who struggled to make themselves understood.
Pascal believes that speaking a language is not like those exams that many of us had to take in grade school, where a tiny spelling or grammar mistake would result in a big red X from the teacher. In the real world, small errors don't matter. What matters is whether we're able to make ourselves understood. She says, if you want to speak English like Faisal with that great confidence, here's the one thing that you can do when you speak. Don't focus on yourself. Focus on the other person and the result you want to achieve. There is a high risk of abrupt biodiversity loss early this century. Abrupt biodiversity loss due to marine heatwaves that bleach coral reefs is already underway in tropical oceans. The risk of climate change causing sudden collapses of ocean ecosystems is projected to escalate further in the 2030s and 2040s. Under a high greenhouse gas emissions scenario, the risk of abrupt biodiversity loss is projected to spread onto land, affecting tropical forests and more temperate ecosystems by the 2050s. These dire projections use historical temperature models to find the upper limit that each species can survive under, as far as we know. Once temperatures rise to levels a species has never experienced, scientists have very limited evidence of their ability to survive.
Marine ecosystems in the Indo-Pacific, Caribbean and the west coast of Africa are at high risk of sudden disruption as early as the 2030s. Hundreds of millions of people across these regions rely on wild-caught fish as an essential source of food. Ecotourism revenues from coral reefs are also a major source of income. In Latin America, Asia and Africa, large parts of the Andes, Amazon, Indonesian and Congo forests are projected to be at risk from 2050 under a high-emission scenario. Sudden loss of animal communities could negatively affect the food security of people in these regions. It could also reduce the long-term ability of tropical forests to lock up carbon if the birds and mammals that are important for dispersing seeds are lost.
This is a hugely important find. It reasserts that Homo erectus origins are in Africa, not Asia. Our discovery suggests, though, that Homo erectus likely did not evolve in Eastern Africa as so often thought but perhaps somewhere else in Africa, or potentially in South Africa itself. More evidence is needed before firm conclusions can be reached, of course. But the South African find means that the Drimolen fossil site, where we made the discovery, could represent an important shift in the simple narrative that all early species of human ancestry are East African.
Several privately funded space companies are locked in a race to claim the trillions of pounds worth of precious metals thought to exist in asteroids. The UK has now entered the race, with the Asteroid Mining Corporation becoming the first of these new firms in the country. In theory, the business case speaks for itself. The incredible expense of space missions would be more than compensated for. But how do you actually go about mining an asteroid? How do you pick one to mine? These are some of the questions I've been pondering while carrying out a feasibility study for the corporation.
There are not just technical challenges to overcome. There is currently concern over the legal ramifications of this burgeoning industry, given the lack of laws and regulations to govern the international nature of space exploration. The United Nations oversees the Outer Space Treaty, signed by 106 countries. This provides a framework for the governance of space-based activities, but it does not provide the detailed legislation needed. There are concerns that the situation could become the new Wild West, with a lack of laws leading to disputes over who has the rights to mine a particular asteroid. There is no mechanism currently in place to adjudicate such claims, and the legal landscape is complex.
Such a population pyramid can be a powerful predictor of future population trends. For example, Rwanda's population pyramid shows it to be a fast-growing country, with most of the population being in the youngest age groups at the bottom of the pyramid. The number will grow rapidly in the coming years. As today's children reach their reproductive years and have children of their own, the total population is almost certain to double within the next few decades.
Like, share, subscribe the channel, and press the bell icon for further updates.